Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Fireplace podcast. Today you've got Mike and myself, no guests, nobody important or special with us. We are just going to chew the fat on the subject of frugality.
Yes, so this comes up quite often in our Facebook group and in our meetups. And people who are new to fire and financial independence, I think often have a view that people who are doing fire are living off mung beans and not going on holiday and cycling to the office and doing a lot of frugal things because that's the only possible way that this could work.
Yes, and it isn't that extreme. It's go at a pace which works for you, isn't it? So, first of all, let's go back to basics then. Why is frugality important?
Yes, I think that's the starting point. So, what we generally say if you're looking for financial independence is you've got to save some money somewhere. And there are two ways you can save it generally. One is by spending less, and one is by earning more. And in this episode, we're going to concentrate on the spending side of things. And the easiest way to save more money on the spending side is to reduce your spending so that there's more money left over at the end of each week or the end of each month or the end of each year, which you then invest.
In some ways, the frugality side the saving side is more easy because I don't know about you, I always found it very hard to up my earnings. I couldn't just press a button and do extra hours in the job that I did, and nor can anybody very easily just raise their hourly pay rate.
Yes, I agree. I think there are a lot of smaller, easier routes to increasing your savings rate by reducing your spending, but there are fewer, much more drastic ways to do it on the earnings side. And earnings generally you only really address if you're changing your job. There is a discussion that comes up every so often about how you ask for a raise, but even that, it's not a regular thing. Whereas with spending, there's lots and lots of little things you can do. And I thought one thing we should discuss is we'll mention the savings rate, which is very important.
Yeah.
So when we say savings rate, we mean the percentage of the money you earn that you then save towards being financially independent and invest. I don't know, Andy, if you want to give us an example.
I in my heyday when I was doing very well, I was beating a 50% savings rate. So half of what I earned, or slightly more, was being saved and invested. The difficulty here is, how do you measure this? Do you say my earnings before tax or my net earnings that arrive in the bank?
Yes, I mean, it doesn't really matter too much, is the answer. But I think most people would measure their net earnings if they spend everything, and then compare that with their net earnings if they divert a chunk of that money into their investments, and compare those two.
The difficulty here, though, is if you are being efficient and using a pension to do the heavy lifting, it might well be that those a big share of your earnings never appear in the bank as your net earnings because they're going out at source into your pension, and
Yeah,
we should count that. It's just, oh, how do you count that? Sometimes that makes it a bit of a muddle.
it can be a bit of a muddle. And I think on the face of it, just because you divert a bit more money into your pension, it does improve your savings rate. But I think if you divert nothing into your pension, your saving rate obviously goes down. And I think one of the clear things is the best, in my view, the best single indicator of how you're getting on with your journey to financial independence is your savings rate, because there's a direct link between the savings rate and how long it's likely to take you to reach financial independence. And I think you've got a good example of that with your 8 or 10 year plan, haven't you?
Yes, I'm very conscious that it's sometimes a little bit off-putting if you're comparing yourself to others. Equally, examples are useful to give you a a measure of if you're doing well. But not everyone will have the same circumstances. So I'm very conscious that there are people that have got three kids and a mortgage and pets and all of these things to pay for, and they may say that's totally unreasonable to hit a 50% savings rate. Equally, there's a single guy with plenty of take-home pay that could ace it.
Yes. I think when we talk about savings rate, I think it's pretty clear that if your savings rate's 10% of your income, you're not going to really reach financial independence anytime soon. And if it's 50%, you're doing pretty well. And a lot of people will be somewhere in the middle. And a lot of the time, the savings rate will start off quite low and then it'll gradually climb up. So
Well, I
we
was going to
always
say
say,
that's maybe the best measure is the best indicator, measure against your own progress. So if you can, whatever your savings rate is this month, try and improve it next month.
yes, no, I think that's a very good view. So going back to frugality, what we wanted to talk about was some examples of good frugality and some examples of bad frugality. So one thing I've always said in the group is that if you're making sacrifices on the road to financial independence and those sacrifices are affecting you or your family, you probably want to think about whether you really need to do that.
I think the key there is thinking. If you're thinking about each spend that you make, then you're doing this in an informed way. And so if you're looking at, do I change my car or do I speed up the project to FI, then that's a measured decision you're making. Same with, do I book that cruise or does it go into the pot?
Yes, so I think we're saying mindful spending is one way of describing that, that every every time you get an opportunity to spend, you at least review that in line with whatever your goals are for financial independence.
But you don't want this to be counterproductive. You don't want to get into what you'd call bad frugality of when you're interfering with quality of life, the quality of the food that you'd eat, whether you're working so hard that you're not sleeping, whether you're not spending the money on going out and having a day's hiking somewhere.
Yes, and I think that comes on to the next point, which has come up a lot in discussions of frugality, is that there are a lot of things that are free that we can do and that you can enjoy. And I think one of the subjects that comes up quite often is people often find new things to do that are free that they enjoy doing. And then by doing those free things that they enjoy doing, they're not doing something else which would have cost them a lot more.
Since you've retired, what free things have you cultivated?
So, as part of early retirement, we downsized and moved by the sea for the very simple reason that it's nice to go walking on the seaside. And if it's not too cold, sometimes to even go for a swim. Those are the kind of things that are very simple things, but don't cost nothing. Okay,
You also
sometimes
go
you might.
you go running on the coastal path, don't you, as well?
Yes, yes. So running's another one. Okay, you need a bit of kit, but running's a good. It's a good social activity. There's a couple of running clubs I'm in, not official ones, but just kind of a WhatsApp group of a bunch of people who, you know, message each other and say, I'm going to run this evening. Who wants to come along? Those kind of things. And if you've got the free time, it's a very good use of your time. It's, yes, it might well end up at the pub at the end, but you know, these things happen.
Hang on, not so frugal after all then. So how much kit's involved in that? Because I'm there thinking, well, you could just put on a pair of underpants and off you go, and that's enough to keep you from getting arrested, but enough to keep people away from you.
Yes, I think there are kind of different levels of this. I think if you're going to do park run or something like that, it doesn't really matter what kind of kit you've got. I think if you're going to do longer runs, I think you do need to invest, in some good shoes and that kind of thing. I think one of the things that came up in our discussion in the group about frugality was you don't want to be too mean on things like buying a good mattress and buying a good bed. And as I'm sure you're aware of those things as a salesman in that area, um, you still want to make sure you're being sensible about buying good food, about having a good mattress, sleeping well, and looking after yourself. I think where it
Yes,
gets
I'd say this is about spending in a way that makes you happy, and don't go too overboard so you're making yourself unhappy with your lack of spending.
exactly, yes. I think we can all give examples of people who've kind of gone too far, cancelled all their subscriptions, um, and their family complains, and then the whole concept of financial independence gets a bad name, gets a bad rap, and then that works very negatively, and it's not good if you're trying to convince your family that this is a good idea.
I think it's useful to tie this in with this idea of happiness and think about, well, what makes you happy? And are there things that make you happy that you could cultivate that don't involve spending? And I tie this all in with ideas like mindfulness. My ideas of therapeutic quality time is being outdoors in nature or spending time with your loved ones. And for that, I think it's useful to reevaluate what matters to you.
I think that's very true, and I think there's a lot of we've had a lot of stories about this in the group, and I think a slight nuance on that is I think a lot of people only really find out those kind of things when they've got the time and the headspace to devote to them. And I think there's a danger that if you're working hard with your head down and you don't look up, you don't quite realize what it is that makes you happy. And I think some people launch themselves into early retirement without really knowing what they're going to do when they get there.
Here's a an interesting spin on frugality. I could make a case that um, frugality is three times more important than increasing your earnings. And here's my logic on that. If I practice frugality and save spending a pound rather than earning an extra pound, I'm saving that immediate pound on my spending, which is great, and that's not coming out of the bank this month. But teaching myself that frugality is also um, reducing my spending, and so reducing my target by a pound now, and and it's doing that whilst I'm working. But then the third one is it's doing it afterwards, after the accumulation phase. So I'm saving the pound going forward in retirement. Is that a mixed up metaphor?
No, I
Is that
think
a
I
bit of
think
a
that's a
mess?
good point. I think it's not just the saving today. If you can if you can create the habit that you don't always need a coffee every time you go into the office, or if you can create a habit that you don't have to stop at that sort of place on the way home and always buy the uh, almond croissant or something like that, then that habit is worth a lot more than the immediate saving.
The other thing I'd say on that good habit is later on, once you're retired, then having that frugality ability, it's a superpower because you're going to be well, certainly I am in the early years of retirement when I need to watch my savings rate. I'm in that sequence risk zone when a crash could do a lot of damage. So I'm mindful that if it hits the fan, I need to reduce my spending somehow. That flexing will be an awful lot easier knowing that I'm able to be frugal and I've learned how to be happy living when it needs on beans on toast and drawing my claws in.
Yes, I think that's a very good point. And for anyone who hasn't seen it clearly, there's a big value in being frugal when you're accumulating money towards financial independence. And as you say, there's as big a value in maintaining those frugal habits when you've got there, because it gives you, again, more resilience. And I think while we have people in our group who are aiming for what we call a fat fire, where they're hoping for quite a high standard of living, even those people are probably aware of frugality, and that gives them more options if their portfolio doesn't do well and they have to lower their withdrawal rate, that they can live on much less, or at least be aware of the areas that they can reduce their spending.
You've got a note here about holidays. What was the point that you wanted to
Yeah,
make about
so
that?
I think one of the criticisms of the fire movement from various corners of the media was that we're all kind of hair shirt wearing people living on mung beans who never go on holiday and never do any fun stuff. And I think what's surprising is that when you ask in the various fire groups and our group particularly, actually people who are pursuing fire tend to go on holiday quite a lot, and probably more in terms of time than the average. But I think most of them would probably claim that they're spending less on those holidays than the average.
Is that because they're choosing just more economical holidays, or is this ideas like you're defraying the cost of the flight over more days away?
I think it's both. I think one of the main focuses for a lot of people in early retirement is travel, especially when they're younger and fitter and more able and more likely to enjoy it. A lot of people have a bucket list of places they want to go, and particularly if you've retired, then you have the time available to go on a holiday outside of the school holidays. And I think, as you were saying, you don't have to take a flight, you can get a train, you're not in a rush. But I think even the people who are still working, still have kids, still go on quite nice holidays. But I think a little bit of intelligence at the booking end of a holiday can still make a huge difference to the spending that you're doing.
We holiday in Scotland quite a lot, as you know. We've just come back a few days ago from Fort William, and we've noticed a difference. Previously, we would have an objective, and so we'd zip off up to Scotland, which is quite a long drive from Derbyshire, and we'd probably do 5 days because we'd have a day travelling, do the objectives, and then a day travelling back. And we said this year, "Well, let's go for longer." And so we've had about 10 days, 11 days, and that's great because that spread the overhead of the travel of the journey over more days there and let us slow down more. And we felt that it wasn't so critical what were we doing each day and were we making the most of our time. It was more enjoyable to just slow it down a bit and stop and have a picnic and watch the wildlife.
Yes, I think I think one of the other things that comes to mind is people in the fire groups and people who are looking at financial independence automatically start to think in slightly longer terms than the average. They've got a target which may be 20 or 30 years away. So those are the sort of people who are likely to be thinking, well, it's kind of autumn time. What about a holiday for next summer? And those are the people that are better going to be better planners, and they're going to be booking their holiday a lot earlier. And that in its own, being better planners means you're going to get a better bargain probably.
I suppose there's a flip side to that that people will be um, indecision will hit them. There's going to be those people that are not natural planners, and the whereas before there was no choice to make. There was, well, I've got these couple of weeks to use, therefore that's when we go on holiday. And when suddenly there are 52 weeks of the year that you could travel, oh, are you going to be struck by we need a dollop more imagination here, and we need to focus ourselves.
Yes, that's a good point, I think. I think one of the things that came up in our group a while ago was people were talking about other groups where people could discuss their holiday plans and get a bit of guidance from other people. I think one of the groups that I saw discussed was interrailing for the older crowd, which is kind of a group to talk about train travel in Europe. And again, it's not so much of a rush because you don't have to kind of get your train travel done and get back in time for work or back in time for university or something. And you could afford to linger a bit longer in places and, not always sleep on the train, sleep in a hotel and those kind of things. And I think those options are quite interesting.
That's interesting. I've recently joined that group.
Ah, very good.
Go on.
Um, yes, and I think the other thing was people were talking about things like house swapping as well, as a sort of both as a very cheap way of accommodation, but also to join the house swap groups to get an idea of what other people are doing, what times what times of the year are good to go to places, and to generally give themselves a bit more of an idea in that space.
The the only other thing I had in mind, this idea of frugality superpower. I think that actually is where the lower earners develop an edge over the high rollers, because the low earners have spent a lifetime training and honing those frugality skills, and so they've got that advantage. They if people are used to a high level of spending, that's very hard. That's very hard to change and to rein in.
No, I agree with that absolutely. I think one of the things that's very easy to miss is that you they say that you what is it you pick up habits from the five people closest to you. And if all of your friends are going on holiday every year and you're trying to be frugal, there's always a lot of peer pressure to keep up with the Joneses and all those kind of things. And I think we talk about that a lot in the group, and I think you do need to be confident in your own decisions. And that's one thing where, yeah, confidence helps you to be clear that what you're doing is the right thing for you and your family for the future.
That's one of the reasons I appreciate our community, and I like fostering it and cultivating it, because I mean we're off to Centre Parks week after next, and that's time spent associating with people that have got this same mindset. I'm hoping some of that rubs off on me.
Yes, I think that's very important. And I think, again, that's why we try and promote this community as a community rather than just a podcast or rather than just a Facebook group. I think the face-to-face side of it makes a big difference. And I think it's a lot more fun and it's very interesting discussing these kind of things in person. And I think holidays, everyone likes talking about holidays.
Yes, I'm conscious in this that we've not focused on specifics of frugality very much. We've not. This hasn't been a brainstorm list of well, buy your tea bags from Aldi because they're 10p cheaper. It's not down to that level of detail. We've chewed over the general trends and ideas here. Do you think
Yes,
we ought to be doing more than that, or is this good enough?
I think a little bit more.
People
I
don't need
think
telling. Don't buy that takeaway coffee on their way to work, do they? Surely that's old hat now.
No, I think we've both written books on this or covering this, and I think one of the key things is a lot of people don't realize what they're spending money on. And these days, it's relatively easy to find out from your bank or your credit card where your money's going. And the first stage is really to look at exactly where your money goes, not necessarily in great detail, but just to get an idea of what your bills are. And one of the most important things I always say is print out a list of every standing order, every direct debit, every payment authority on a credit card or debit card or anything else, or any kind of app you've got, any kind of PayPal, Cash App, anything like that. Just get a big long list of all the things that are going out regularly and start from there.
I've long been in the habit of draw money from the machine and pay cash where I possibly can for things, because then I see the money dwindling in my wallet and know the rate that I'm spending at. And I see people now using their phones to pay and just booping for small payments left, right, and centre. And I think, how can they have any idea of their spending? unless they go back afterwards and track it all. But I imagine most don't.
It's a good question. I use my phone. One thing that helps in my case is I have a credit card with my bank, and I see the credit card balance with the bank balance, and I automatically remove the credit card balance from the bank balance whenever I look at that. So it's relatively clear to me how my spending's going because I can see it on one page. It I agree. It's easier to track if you've got cash, and I think if you trust yourself and your partner or anyone else who you share cards with, you are going to be quite often doing it retrospectively. You're going to be looking at last month's spending, last year's spending, and working out the trends. And that's maybe not as much control as you might want. But I think monitoring is as good as controlling if you know what's happened in the past.
They do say what gets measured gets managed, and I know that's business speak, but it does apply to savings and fire and spending.
Yes. And I mean, I think I always say to people that without too much difficulty, you can always find a bit of saving in someone's regular spending. There are so many areas you can look at. You can start with the big ticket items. You can start with mortgages. You can start with utility bills, and then you can work down the kind of list of spending items to supermarkets, to cars, to fuel, to right down to kind of media subscriptions and those kind of things, and tech and all those kind of things. And generally, everyone, even the cleanest fire devotee, will probably have some savings somewhere. They can renegotiate a mobile contract or something. There'll be some pounds somewhere they can save, and I think you just have to keep doing that regularly.
I think the biggest challenge to this would be if you've got a partner who isn't on the same page on frugality.
Yes, yes, we're doing this episode as a kind of sandwich between a number of interviews, and I think that's one of the themes that's going to come out in our next interview next week, is how important it is to have a partner who's on the same page as you. And I think it's something we've seen recently, particularly with people who are on their second partners, and where they've had a bad financial experience with their first partner, they tend to be much more cautious second time round.
Yeah. Well, we all learn through our mistakes, don't we? Whether it's debt or relationships, any of it, it all serves to shape us. Is there anything else to say on this, or have we chewed it over sufficiently?
I think we've chewed it over. I think we'll come back to frugality in the future. I mean, I think it's a cornerstone of the whole process, and I think it has a role to play all the way through. And I'm sure it'll come up again when we talk about drawdown and bridging and all those kind of things to come. But I thought it'd be good to kind of just set the ground a bit with a quick episode to give people an idea of some things maybe to think about.
Well, once this has gone live, I think I'll start a Facebook post on our group and try and get people chewing over the whole topic and maybe sharing tips, but also discussing the challenges they've faced in trying to be frugal.
Yes, and I'm sure, as you said, it's something that will definitely come up in our meeting in the forest that's coming up in a few weeks' time.
Yes, looking forward to it. It's all getting very real now.
Me too. Yeah, it should be good.
I've been making name badges and all sorts. I'm fired up and ready to go.
Very good. Right, I think that's all I had to cover on the subject. I think that's about it for today.
Super.
Well,
thanks, Mike.
Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks, Andy. If you like this, give us a like and subscribe to our podcast.
Hey, we didn't do a disclaimer. Do we need one for this? We've not done anything that could possibly be called financial advice. Are we in the clear?
I don't think we have, really. I think we can add a disclaimer that anything in the whole podcast should not be construed as financial advice. But I think this particular episode is pretty safe. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike. Bye-bye.
Thanks, then.